What is your scariest paranormal experience? Redditor 1. When I lived in my previous house, I lived in a finished basement with a room that made you walk past the laundry room. Almost every night when I would walk past the laundry room, I would see a tall pale woman in a long white dress and long black hair float by at the same speed I was walking, and when I get to the end of the door frame she would disappear into the wall. Well, once we started packing to move out, my uncle came over to help with the move. We were clearing out the laundry room. Bear with me here. I was standing inside the laundry room facing out. My uncle was outside the laundry room facing in. While we were packing, I saw my uncle turn milk white, freeze while bending down, and lock his eyes on something behind me. I ask what's wrong, and he says he saw someone walk behind me and disappear into the wall. And without a beat I ask what they looked like. He proceeded to describe someone who looks exactly like my description I made earlier in this post. At that second my mother comes downstairs and tells us we're ready to leave. Since then another one of my uncles moved in and I've visited, and I haven't seen the white lady since. But the look on my uncle's face will frighten me for the rest of my life. Redditor 2. Stayed in an Airbnb in Prenzlauer Berg, Berlin. I couldn't decide if the place was decorated to imitate 1970s East German style or whether it just hadn't been decorated in 40 years. I suspected the latter. On the first night, me and my friends all heard footsteps in the night walking across the apartment. Then the following night we were having drinks in the kitchen and a lamp was knocked off its table by some invisible force. Shortly afterwards we heard 3 distinct loud knocks at the apartment door. Being the only male, I rushed to answer it thinking it could be the landlord or something, but there was nobody there. When we checked the TripAdvisor reviews, several other guests had also reported similar spooky goings on. Redditor 3. It was around 5 in the morning and it was 2 days before my moving day. I was hungry and I had decided to go downstairs for something to eat. When I reached the bottom of the staircase, I heard a girl humming some song. I didn't know if I was hearing things, if I was tired, but I was definitely freaked out. I was looking in between the piles of boxes if there was someone hiding in between them, but there was nobody. One night before moving day, I headed back downstairs and heard the same girl humming. This time it was a different tune. I was so scared. I guess this was her way of saying goodbye to me forever. Redditor 4. We were camping at a very remote lake and I just got the campfire going and was setting in with my wife. Out of the corner of my eye I see something drop right by the fire. At first I thought it was a branch, but it turned out to be part of a deer leg about the first foot of the hoof or so. All of a sudden I had this horrible feeling and we jumped into the van and drove the 40 miles back to town. Redditor 5. I have 2 incidents. One, I was home alone with the dog. I was downstairs watching TV. The dog was lying on the floor in front of the couch of where I was sitting. I then started to hear the stairs creak like someone was walking down them. The dog jumped up and started growling. No one was in the house. I can see the staircase from where I was sitting. 2, I would occasionally hear a soft humming in my room. It happened ever so often. It came from the corner of my room where a chair sat. I never thought anything of it until my sister ran out of my room screaming. Redditor 6. This happened when I was just starting middle school in Texas, but my mom, grandmother, and myself all lived in a 2-bedroom apartment that was fairly new. However, after about a year of living there, I noticed that the faucets would turn on by themselves whenever I was alone, and that there was always something in the corner of my eye. I thought I was being paranoid, but then my mother brought a Buddhist priest into our room and had us do some sort of ritual. Now I am by no means religious, and I consider myself to be agnostic, but I went along with it because my mother and the priest were very insistent that I sit for prayer, and that I keep a specific bracelet made of embroidery thread and beads on me at all times. Afterwards the movement in the corner of my eye and the magical self-turning faucets stopped happening. Fast forward to around sophomore year of high school, me and my family had recently moved out of our apartment and into a new house that my mom had just bought. While we were settling in and having dinner after a long day of moving and unpacking, I finally asked my mom what was the priest doing at the apartment so long ago. Reason why I didn't ask till then was because my mom is Buddhist, and it's not uncommon for her to do things related to the religion. She then proceeds to tell me that she called the priest there to bless us in the apartment cause apparently a neighbor that was living next to us had died of a heart attack, and their body was only discovered a few days later. The day the body was found was the day the priest was brought to my old apartment. Strange things were happening for about a week, and apparently in private. The priest told my mom that we all almost died due to the malicious spirit that was looming over our specific floor, as the neighbor across from us also had some strange things going on too, with things being misplaced, faucets turning on by themselves, and the movement of a figure in the corner of her eye. Apparently my mother was experiencing more than just the faucet turning on by itself and moving shadows. According to her, she was prompted to call the priest because she kept seeing a person always watching me in my sleep. For context, I shared a room with her and had top bunk. One instance of her seeing the ghost was around 4 days before the priest was called, and apparently she heard shifting and talking above her and assumed I was still awake and not asleep on a school night. She drew back the curtains that provided privacy for me, and saw that I was knocked out in dreamland. Obviously she was confused, but decided to go back to her bunk, but then saw a pair of feet at my staircase. She immediately skirted to the stairs leading up to my bunk only to find no one there, and me still sleeping peacefully. The next night, the same thing happened, only she didn't hear any sounds, nor were there mysterious feet on stairs, but that night when my mom was about to go to bed herself, she saw someone staring at her through the gap between the beds and stairs to see a ghostly figure of someone in a white hospital gown and very ashen-looking skin with long black hair peeking into my bunk. She couldn't get a good look at it as it immediately ran away and disappeared through the door. Apparently that was the final straw for her, and the priest was called to bless the house and offer protective charms for us, and she didn't tell me because it would have scared me and would make me want to move out. We were fairly poor, so there wasn't anywhere we could move to. Needless to say, I can now never see those apartment complexes the same again, and any time I drive down the road where they reside, I always shudder at the thought of what would have happened to us if the priest wasn't called. I don't know if this story is exaggerated or not, seeing as it's coming from my mother's mouth, and because it happened a long time ago, but regardless, it was one of the scariest revelations to ever happen to me. Redditor 7. When I was 12, I was staying at my grandmother's house for the summer. They owned a small 20-acre ranch in Cortez, Colorado. One morning she asked me if I wanted to go pick out some old horses with her. For some reason I said no, totally out of the norm. I stayed in her bed and watched TV. When I noticed something in the dark hallway about 30 minutes after she left. It looked like an angel, but not really. Just really smoky, honestly, from what I can remember. Then suddenly the phone rang right by me and it disappeared. I answered thinking it was my grandmother. It wasn't. Some strange voice saying, "Is this Willie?" No one besides family called me Willie. I replied, "Who's this?" He replied, "I just witnessed your grandmother get T-boned by a semi. She told me to come pick you up. I'm on my way to bring you to the hospital." I said, "No, that's fine, my neighbors will take me." Turns out my neighbors were home and I ran over and I went to play with those kids a lot, and the mom took me to the hospital and my mom drove 4 hours to get me. When I saw the photos of the car, the passenger seat was not even a part of the car anymore. To this day I feel like an angel made me stay home, or else I wouldn't be on earth anymore. I didn't believe in God till that moment. But now I definitely do. Redditor 8. I once was awake at 3 a.m. in my house and heard a huge knock on my door. It was such a hard knock that it shook my door. Everyone was dead asleep, and my cat was with me. I stayed up until 4 a.m. before I could feel somewhat comfortable to go to sleep again. Redditor 9. Not me, but my sister was sitting next to her 4-year-old son's bed in the hospital, where he had undergone major surgery. Her son suddenly asked her, "Who is that man?" "What man?" she asked, seeing no one. "That old man over by the door," her son replied. "He wants me to go with him." Alarmed, my sister said, "Tell him no, you're not going anywhere." Redditor 10. Middle of the night. I woke up suddenly from a deep sleep. There was a lights coming through the window which faced a blank wall that was so blindingly bright, as though someone had placed stadium-grade floodlights right outside. I tried to get up, but was completely paralyzed from head to toe. I could only stare and blink. This went on for about 10 seconds that felt like an hour. Then, nothing. I woke up. It was a regular morning. Never had anything like that happen before or since. If it was a dream, then it was the most realistic and terrifying dream I've ever had, since I've never had a lucid dream or anything like that. I am convinced that it was real, whatever the ducking duck that was. Redditor 11. My girlfriend at the time and 2 other girls were living in a house that they claimed had a ghost. I moved in with them and it was almost immediately apparent that there was some sort of activity there. Things would frequently fall off the walls or shelves, and another time we woke up to a flooded kitchen, but nothing was amiss with the piping, refrigerator or drain. Our room was in the basement and things would frequently fall off our shelves. My laundry hamper flipped itself upside down on a few occasions and I would have dreams that I was suffocating and wake up to find my blanket wrapped around my neck. We always had the craziest dreams in that bedroom too, it was so bizarre. I've known a few people who've lived in that house since it was on the edge of campus and they all claim it's haunted. Most bizarre was one of the girls upstairs started sleepwalking on a nightly basis and would just clean out the fridge eating through all the food. She installed a lock on the outside of her door and would have the other roommates lock it at night for her. Shit was bizarre and I'm so glad not to be living there anymore. Edit. We also went through a phase of sexsomnia when we slept in that room. We'd both wake up in the middle of intercourse with each other when we'd been dead asleep. Redditor 12. I was visiting with a friend late at night in college at her new rental house for the first time. It was just us 2 and her brown and white Boston Terrier Maisie. It was like 2 a.m. and I was getting ready to leave, so I picked up the couple beer cans we had been sipping on to throw them away. I walk around the corner of the living room into the kitchen and crack open the pantry door to get to the trash can, and as I open it at the bottom of my vision I see Maisie dart straight into the pantry from under me. I laughed thinking she was looking for food scraps, so I call out, "No chicken for you, Maisie," as I pull open the door all the way. That's when I fucking froze. Even typing it now gives me goosebumps. The pantry itself was only about 1.5 feet deep and there was absolutely no room on the floor for a dog to enter all the way inside. There was a bunch of cans down there and the tiny trash can itself barely fit inside. It would later dawn on me that it also would be physically impossible for a dog to enter the way I saw it enter, both just by the space available to maneuver and also for the fact it would have had to phase through my legs to even get to the opening. I only had the door cracked 4 or 5 inches and was standing directly in front of it, only barely open enough to reach my hand inside and drop the cans in the trash. I was shocked and chilled when I realized there was no dog inside and I had just clear as day seen something that wasn't possible. My brain was kinda locked up, so I just stuttered out again, "Maisie?" And then my friend calls from the living room, "Maisie is in here." I silently did a 360 and studied the entire room around me. I could not find a single thing or angle that could have possibly cast some kind of reflection or any type of explanation. While admittedly it was out of the corner of my eye, I saw it clear as day. I can picture it still right now. It was a long-haired white-looking dog that was probably a bit bigger than Maisie the Boston, and it had a long snout, so it was definitely not the same breed. I go back and tell my friend about what I just saw, expecting her to make fun of me and not believe me. Instead, she gets a concerned look and start describing to me that since they moved in, Maisie would randomly bark down the end of the hallway sometimes, and follow something around the floor with her eyes from the couch and get all defensive alert. My friend was put off by this as it was clearly weird and Maisie never used to do anything of the sort. She even said some nights she thought she had heard something that sounded like an animal moving around the house outside her room, but figured it might just be rats, squirrels in the basement floorboard super old house. But the real kicker was, when she first moved in, inside the bottom small kitchen drawer was a small locked wooden decorative box with the word Alfredo on it, and when first discovered she had picked it up and shook it and said it sounded like sand, so she came to the conclusion that they must have been pet ashes. Now what kind of pet would you name Alfredo if not a small, white dog? I remember I was stone cold sober at that point of the night as I had quit drinking hours earlier preparing to drive. And I'm not a heavy drinker to begin with. I also frequently would stay up until 3 or 4 a.m. at that time in my life, so 2 a.m. wasn't an hour where I would be bleary-eyed or sleep deprived, pretty normal hours for me. I know what I saw that night and the shit still gives me the creeps to this day. I have had other paranormal experiences stemming from a childhood home that affected my entire family, but this was the first and only time I have ever actually seen something that just was a straight-up impossibility. There was also a 10-year gap between living in the spooky house and this incident, I'm not one to see a ghost everywhere I go. This shit was and still is personally shocking for me to have experienced and recollect. Redditor 13, I've had quite a few that are difficult to describe. One which didn't seem very scary as I was experiencing it, but was one where I was probably close to death happened while I was asleep. All I remember was in a dream state, I started hearing a rhythmic pattern. 3 beats, pause, 3 more beats, pause, and so on. It progressively became louder, until I woke up gasping for air, and it was my own hand hitting me on the chest, as if trying to wake me up. Redditor 14, I moved into a newly built apartment with my best friend. There was a closet in the kitchen wall with space for a washing machine and dryer. We kept cleaning stuff and the ironing board in there. It had a folding shutter door that squealed like heck every time it was opened or closed. I can't tell you how many times we'd come out from our bedrooms and find the doors open and that stupid ironing board pulled out into the room like someone was gonna start ironing any second. Was never that way when we got home from work and there were no squeaks from the door being open once we were home. One time I found it, put everything back, played video games my friend back in his room. Came out to the living room and that damn door was open and the ironing board pulled back out. Uck. Then there was my bedroom. The apt had central air and kept nice and cool, but my room was excruciatingly hot all day and night. Some wonky pagan friend of my roommate's said there was probably a demon infestation in my room. Awesome. That kept me awake and paranoid all night way too many times. The worst though was the time I was laying in bed during the day, reading a book. I heard my roommate flush the toilet, grab his keys, and walk out the door. I even saw his shadow walk past my blinds. Like 5 minutes later, I get up and go to the bathroom and I see him sitting in his room playing computer. I jump a foot because I thought I was alone. I said I thought he'd left and he's looking at me weird and says he didn't go anywhere, hasn't even moved for the last hour. And I'm like, well, who the heck just walked through the house, grabbed keys, and left? He's like, no one was here, it's been totally quiet. I'm not religious nor do I believe in the supernatural, but when your stuff starts moving around and you're hearing things that no one else does, it tends to freak you out. We didn't live there long and that was thankfully my last, and only, paranormal experience. Redditor 15. My son was about 18 months old, getting around real well on his own. My mother had bought him this little tyke slide, and since we didn't have a backyard at the house we were in, we put the slide in his room by the window. One morning I was doing housework and was getting ready to vacuum. It was a small house that would take me less than 15 minutes to vacuum the whole place, so I put my son in his room to play and put up the baby gate to keep him out of the way. He headed right for his slide, so I figured that would keep him occupied until I was finished. I'm down the hall in my bedroom vacuuming, when suddenly I'm hit with a wave of nausea so strong I thought I was going to vomit. This never happens, so I'm waiting for it to pass and a sudden thought comes to me to go check on my son. I push it away as I was almost finished and I would go get him momentarily as soon as I put the vac away. As soon as I resume pushing the vacuum, a voice yells in my ear, "Go check the baby," so loud that the little hairs in my ear start to freak out. As I reach up to put a finger in my ear, I feel hands physically push me in the direction of my bedroom door so hard I am shoved to my knees, so hard as a matter of fact, that in the following days I felt like I had a slight whiplash. Needless to say, I have a freaky adrenaline rush unlike anything I have ever felt and I pop to my feet and go running down the hallway to check my son. As I round the corner, I am met with a more horrific sight than a dozen spooks. My son is standing on the top of his slide, all smiles, with the mini blind cord wrapped firmly around his neck. One little foot is waving out over the slide like he's preparing to throw himself down it. I launch myself over the baby gate to get to him just as he steps off. Fuck, I got to him just in time and gathered him up. The cord was wrapped around his neck 3 times and had already left a mark, but he was okay. I was destroyed. What would I have told the grandmas? The narrowly avoided tragedy was immensely scarier than the event that preceded it. I thanked whoever that was profusely, said a few more prayers of thanks throughout the day for allowing me to avoid a horror that would have haunted me with guilt for the rest of my life. This is not the only encounter with this entity, but I'll save the rest for another post. Redditor 16, I'm pretty sure I got wanked off by a ghost, stupid as it sounds. I was house sitting for a family friend in a really old house, woke up in the early hours of the morning to see a shadow figure over my lower chest and the sheet rising up then falling down, was very freaked out, sore and red, down there. I know it sounds ridiculous, frowning face. I didn't tell anyone about it because I was embarrassed. My brother spent the night there a couple of weeks later and won't talk about it, not sure if it happened to him too. Redditor 17, I grew up isolated from other kids. I just never had anyone to play with growing up and I never was really creative. Growing up other kids absolutely hated me, and now I understand all that trauma shit, but oh well. I did have something I played with growing up. I would play with them in the house, outside. Sometimes I would just yell at my mom that I was going outside to play, and I would play with who growing up, I thought was another kid. Yeah, no. I was really wrong. I got this problem where sometimes I see ghosts. As a kid I never really understood this, and so I would play with the elderly or other kids, and sometimes I would just meet adults. I'm gonna be honest and say my life was probably saved by something supernatural, because I was so close to being trafficked on time as a child. But most of these ghosts were friendly with me. First story, I one time went to the store with my parents. I noticed this couple seeming to be around us everywhere we went, but as a kid I never really thought of it. Looking back, that might have been a close call. Anyways, after some time of shopping I got really bored because, well, nothing to play with. I looked up on a shelf and I saw something I really wanted. I stared at it for a while. When I looked up I did not see my parents, so I looked around and still did not see them. Toddler me panicked. Toddler me started getting worried. Growing up I did not have decent speech and my speech was really bad, so most of the time I was quiet. Coupled with how I was treated sometimes, it caused me to grow up sometimes afraid to even talk. So I didn't scream or yell for my parents. I started running around, looked for them. At some point the panic really started to set in and I started calling for them. Somehow I had by that point ran to the other side of the store. And somehow the couple seemed to always follow me with a shopping cart, and they were watching me. At some point the lady tried to grab me but I ran. The couple started chasing me and somehow I lost them. Toddler me panicked even more. So I ran toward the beer aisle. As I did I looked up and saw a guy. I stopped. Somehow, I felt really comfortable and stopped panicking in that moment. I still don't really understand why. For some reason as a kid I just thought this stranger would know, so I asked this person if they had seen my parent. They did. He told me to go a certain way. Somehow the guy's voice just sounded so smooth. And so I turned around to follow to where he pointed. That when I remember to thank him. At that point I had done a 360 and it had probably only been 10 seconds since I had done that 360. The odd part was that the guy was gone. The doors behind him was still, and that is the only direction he could have gone to disappear. But alas, toddler me was only confused and decided to go in the direction he pointed me to. I found me parents, they were worried and everything. So as a teenager I remembered that and I questioned it. I thought it was odd that I met a guy who looked like a grocery worker from the 60s. I looked it up for a couple hours trying to find the guy, and he was dead. Dead before I was even born. The guy died in the store by accident when something fell on top of him and he was crushed. Man, looking back, that was crazy. Second story, the ghost kid I would play with growing up was like my best friend. For some reason I never picked up that it was odd that I never met the kid's family. I only found out because they showed me. One night I snuck out to go with them and went into a field near my house. I watched the kid die in that field. They stood next to me and watched it as well, holding my hand. We talked about it. I went home. The next day I told my mom what I saw. Oh man, I think that scared my mom. I still played with the ghost after that. That was like the beginning of my relationship with seeing ghosts. But yeah, I have had a lot of paranormal experiences. But my most scary one I will not tell. That shit just gives me the crawlers even thinking about it. Redditor 18, lived in a modular home about 3 off the ground. My room faced one of the fences to our backyard. My bed was on the wall right next to one of the windows of said wall facing the fence. Started off by random knocking around 7 a.m. on my wall. I'd check outside and nothing was there. I was completely home alone. About a week after that, I'd wake up and see a shadow on my wall of a head walking back and forth through the walkway to my backyard. Again, I'd check outside and nothing was there. I'm thinking maybe it's my dad checking in on the house as I was home alone while parents were at work. He'd always tell me he was at his mechanic shop across town. Well, in our backyard I had a gazebo where my dog, Snoopy, would always sleep in. I'd walk him in there every night without any problems. Well, one ducking day, while this was going on, I step outside to put him to bed and he's on top of our stairs with all the hairs on his neck standing up growling at the gazebo. So I'm looking at this ducking thing and I see a huge compressor my dad kept in there roll from one side of the gazebo door to the other. I said duck that, so I ran inside and closed my door until I fell asleep. Probably 2 or 3 days after that incident, I had some Chinese takeout in the fridge, and it was maybe around 12 or 1 a.m., so both of my parents were asleep. So I'm heating up my food and I feel a huge ducking presence behind me, and I'll never forget this feeling. It felt like a 7-foot something was standing behind me, so I turn around, and as soon as I do I hear my name being whispered and my mom's voice in my ear. I'm freaking the duck, so grab my food and bolt to my room and hide under the sheets, leaving the hallway light on. Whoop-de-ducking do, I'm hearing footsteps going to my door and I shit you not, there's 2 boot shadows standing under my door. My ducking doorknob rattles and I'm literally in the biggest fear I've ever had in my life. I couldn't call out for any of my parents because I was so scared. I blacked out of fear and woke up the next morning and told my mom everything that was going on. She ended up blessing the house and everything went away for a few years. Long story, but duck that goddamn summer, and duck that creepy ass house. Redditor 19, I once had a messy room filled with toys that somehow cleaned itself up. No begging, pleading or other threats were made to any of the children, yet it still happened. It must have been ghosts. Redditor 20, I was staying at a friend's house. I had felt uneasy all day and when we went to sleep it happened. I was half asleep when I noticed a darkness on the ceiling stretching its way towards me. I was frozen in place and then the figure began to drip down at me. A litany of no's ran through my head when suddenly the spirits of my gran and my uncle appeared next to the bed and the darkness withdrew. Redditor 21, I was at my farm 5 years ago and we had these gate that took 2 people to move back for the horses, and in the dead on midnight I woke up and went to check on the horses and one of the gates was over the wall to the other empty stable and the wall was 5'8. Redditor 22, I have twice dreamed the future. Not anything useful, just these random moments that I would not have remembered if it wasn't for the deja vu, then the realization that I had dreamed of it before. Redditor 23, this happened back in the early 2000s. I was driving down a street with some friends in the car, and we started passing this alley. I looked right just as we were 1/4 of the way through, and this garbage truck was barreling down the alley at us. There was no way we could make it in time, but I jammed my foot on the accelerator anyway. I remember the headlights were so close that they flooded the car. A moment later and we were on the other side, and the truck flew past us. I have no idea how we were not hit. None of my friends understood what had just happened either. I can't prove this, but we were going to get hit, and then it was like we teleported. Redditor 24, my partner and I had a sleep paralysis dream about the same woman one day apart while on a trip in Indonesia. I had the dream first, but I never described it to him beforehand. Once he had his, he told me and we both were instantly creeped out at the resemblance of our dreams. We talked to locals in the island we were staying at and they all got spooked. Many were so spooked they didn't want to say anything more. We were finally told that it was a known demon spirit that visited us. I had terrible stomach sickness, constantly throwing up. A local became a great friend of ours after this experience told us that it was the demon spirit inhabiting my stomach. No amount of medicine was helping my stomach bug go away. He gave me a very violent exorcism and the sickness went away. Do I believe it? Part of me doesn't, but a small part of me does. Redditor 25, I have a few, but this one is by far the scariest. So when I was like 6, I had a few childhood friends that I would hang out with a lot because our moms were friends. One night me and my friend are playing in a toy tent in my bedroom. Everything is fine until the silhouette of a small, deformed figure appears and starts walking around the perimeter of the tent. The little ducker kind of looked vaguely like Dobby but more wrong. It slowly made its way to the door of the tent, and vanished. I would have thought I made it up, but my friend swears he saw it too. No clue what it was, but I never saw anything like it again. Redditor 26. Back when I was in high school theater, our director had warned us our theater was haunted by the original theater teacher and we didn't believe him. One night after everyone had left, I was tidying up the stage. I saw the silhouette of someone in the lighting booth. I assumed it was Ben, the lighting guy. I shouted to him that I was leaving, and the silhouette waved back. Suddenly, all of the lights started going crazy. There was a setting on the switchboard that made all the lights do that. We called it the party button. Once I got home, I texted Ben and asked when he left, and he said that he left an hour before I did, and that I would have been the only one in the theater. I started freaking out. Next morning, I went up to the booth to check the computer's log of lighting directions and saw that there was no record of anyone clicking the party button. They had just done that by themselves. Used to not believe in anything supernatural, but I've since changed my mind. Redditor 27. I lived in a house with a circle of rooms on the main floor, all connected by archways with no doors. You stand in the living room, it connects to the dining room. Walk from that end to the kitchen. From there it leads to the main entryway of the house. Continue walking and you're back in the living room. I was home alone once and decided to go get a snack. I walked through the arch leading to the dining room. This is important, you'll see, but the dining room has large solid oak chairs around the table that probably weigh about 80 pounds apiece. I then walk through the arch on the other side to the kitchen. The refrigerator is right next to the archway connected to the dining room that I came through. Opening the refrigerator door blocks your view of this archway, just like in all your favorite horror movies. I open the fridge, close it, and turn right to walk back the way I came. To my horror, one of the heavy wooden chairs have silently been moved about 15 feet from the table to block my path. It's sitting in the archway, perfectly blocking my way through, facing me. There's not a chance in heck anyone could move this thing quietly in the 10 seconds it took me to open the fridge, grab a drink, and then close it. I panicked and grabbed my gun. I swept the whole house, including every closet and cabinet. I didn't find anything. I moved the chair back, picked up my cat, then I ran to my room. I locked the door and fell asleep with my handgun and shotgun loaded beside me while holding my cat. I don't know if you can shoot ghost, but I was ready to find out. Edit: if you're wondering why these chairs are so heavy, they are antique. They were hand carved by one of my ancestors that were a pretty well-known woodworker of their time for a government building. They had been passed down for generations. Redditor 28. I was talking on the phone, alone in my bedroom, when something smacked me upside the head. Now granted, this was before I got my Tourette's diagnosis, so it's entirely possible that it was a bad tick that I had no context for, but no tick I've had since then has felt quite like an open palm slamming into the back of my head. Redditor 29. There was a car accident in front of my house and I saw the driver die. A couple weeks later I was driving and I saw him clearly walking in the exact spot he died. He walked behind a gas pump and was gone. I did a full circle to see if my vision was just blocked by the path he was walking. There was nobody there. Redditor 30. To start, our house was built in 1936 and we bought it in 2016. I can't remember how long it was after we moved in, a couple weeks to a couple months, but I decided to take a nap. I was either dreaming or was half awake, half asleep. I felt more of the later because I thought my eyes were open, but I'm not 100%, and I saw this dark figure at the end of our bed. It was strange because I remember trying to get up but couldn't. Once I did, nothing was there but my heart was racing. Anyway, that's the only time I've seen George. Instincts tell me it's male. I kind of feel all the truly creepy ghosts are female and I'm not getting that vibe. He's still around. He is more active in the warmer months than in winter. He likes to hang out in our finished attic. I'll be up late and hear footsteps. The attic floor is pretty squeaky. Old house walk across the attic. Our cat will rip around upstairs in the middle of the night, so I figure he's playing with her. He likes to move stuff, which is disconcerting sometimes because it takes me by surprise. I went to feed our cat one morning, and her bowl was in a completely different room than it usually is. No one moved it, I checked. I will catch something out of the corner of my eye on the stairs leading to the attic. Things like that. Besides the first encounter, he's been a decent house spirit. Redditor 31. This isn't scary, but I had a restroom across my room. I was staring into the restroom for some reason, then I noticed some floating pairs of eyes. Then instead of moving or looking away, I had a staring contest with this thing and I won. Then I realized what just happened, so I tried to tell my family. No one believed me, for it never came back. Redditor 32. It's not a very exciting story. I've always been very skeptical of ghosts and I haven't seen many unexplainable things, but there's one thing that I know that I saw. When I was 16, I was at my high school sweetheart's house, in his bedroom with the door open, sitting on his bed just talking. We were the only people in his house at the time. His bedroom was at the end of a hallway, with only a bathroom just beyond his bedroom. Whenever we were sitting on his bed facing each other, if I was looking at him, his bedroom door was in my left side peripheral view. I heard no sound like movement or footsteps, but I saw a tall, dark-haired man wearing all white, and this man walked by his bedroom door toward the bathroom. I can only imagine what my face looked like, because we were in the middle of a conversation and I stopped speaking and was stunned. I could barely explain to him what I just witnessed. Once I finally did, his reaction was completely nonchalant. He just goes, "Oh, yeah, that was probably my Uncle Ernie. I've seen him before. I think he's like a guardian angel or something." Maybe that should have made me feel better? But I was beyond shaken and freaked out. I got super emotional and just wanted to go home. Maybe Ernie wanted to chase me off that day. If so, it worked. Redditor 33. When I was a child, roughly 5 or 6, my family moved to a cabin in Arizona. We didn't have very much money, so I imagine the rent was really cheap. It was about a mile off the highway. We had one neighbor about 100 yards away, other than that just isolated in the desert. It was a pretty simple cabin layout. First floor was open with my parents' bedroom in the back corner. There was a loft that was up top that went to the back of the cabin. My sister and I slept on either side of the loft. There was a large window on the back wall in between us. After a week or two, when my mother would wake us up in the morning, I would almost immediately fall back asleep on the couch. My mother asked why I was so tired, so I told her. Every night I would wake up, there would be a glowing white woman with no feet and crazy hair that would sort of slowly glide towards the window in the loft. When she got close to the window, her head would fall off and roll backwards. This repeated over and over. Gliding towards the window, then her head falling off and rolling. So I would hide under the covers, being as still and quiet as I could all night. After hearing this, my mother had a friend come over to burn sage, I think is what they used. In the middle of the burning, a gust of wind came from nowhere inside the cabin, blew the front door open. We had a 120 pounds Rottweiler at the time who went chasing outside and barking like crazy, then shortly came back inside whimpering. The last straw was when my father turned into the kitchen and saw the white woman apparently. He turned around and ended up with burn-like marks on his back. Not even a month later, we were moving out. My mother and I came to get the last bit of stuff, which was a giant area rug in the loft. As she was bringing it downstairs, she said it felt as if someone was lifting the back of it going the downstairs. As we were loaded up about to drive away, there were faces in the window watching us leave. My mother and I still talk about this over 30 years later, and I will never forget it. Redditor 34. This lasted for about 3-4 months. I would wake up every night and feel something watching me intensely. It was almost always 3-5 a.m. I had to go to my parents' bedroom with my pillow and sleep on the floor. I would also get sleep paralysis too. This dark thing would be standing in front of me, in the corner of my room or behind me. My mom felt like that too, but not as much as me. My dad and my brother were absolute fine and felt nothing. I was scared at first, but I had gotten used to it by then. Also, whenever I went past my front door hallway, I forgot what it's called in English, I would see that same completely dark tall shadow thing at the corner of my eyes. A shaman came to our house and said there was a powerful dark spirit in our house. It wasn't powerful at first, but it got stronger with the women's fear. The spirit only affects women. We had to do a ritual and it's been fine ever since. This may not make sense that much as I am translating this from Mongolian to English in my head. Redditor 35. I was on a 2-lane highway on a long road trip. A semi-truck pulled out of a construction site up ahead of me, but was going so slow I had to brake hard not to hit it. There was more than ample time for it to be moving. So it's a 75 miles per hour, and I usually go plus 10 on long drives in the middle of nowhere. The semi at this point is cruising at 80, which is shockingly fast for an 18-wheeler. I was annoyed that I was only going 80, but I told myself it wasn't a big deal and just be patient. Immediately, I hear a voice in my head scream past the ducking truck, right the duck now. I checked the oncoming lane, dropped to fourth, slammed the gas, and right as I pulled my front bumper parallel to the back corner of the rig, one of the tires exploded and I saw the steel belt flying backwards where my car had just been. If you're not familiar, those belts can tear a person in half, shred through metal, etc. when they burst. I flew past the truck at about 115 and saw it swerving back and forth the highway as it tried to pull into the shoulder. I chain smoked 5 cigarettes at the next available gas station. I don't really have an answer to that one. I'm an atheist, but geez. And on my trip home, also on a 2-lane highway but this time in the dead of night, a semi tried to pass the car in front of it. There was literally no way. It was about 3 lengths back and would take a couple minutes to overtake it at its speed. And did not react at all to the fact it was literally on a head-on collision course with me. At 85 plus mile per hour I had to duck into the narrow, guardrailed shoulder, as it screamed past me. There were quite a few bridge areas along that stretch that didn't have a shoulder at all. I refused to take routes with 2-lane highways any longer. Redditor 36, worked at a daycare as a night janitor on a popular Washington State University. As the only person in the locked building at night, I would know since it was my job to make sure it was empty and to lock the building up. Would get real spooky vibes while I was walking down a particular hallway, like the hair on the back of my neck would stand up and I'd get goosebumps instantly, or I'd get really angry all of a sudden for it to pass just as quickly. One night literally all of the artwork in the aforementioned hallway fell off of the wall simultaneously as I was sweeping down the hall with a dust mop next to it all. No floor vibrations, no wind gusts, just suddenly 20 or more finger paintings on display fell off the string they were butterfly clipped to. No reasonable explanation for why they all fell, especially since it was the only place in the whole building with artwork that fell, even in the hallway. The classroom behind that wall section was one of the toddler rooms. It also has a bunch of kid toys in it, those puzzle boards with the cut-out pieces that are shaped like instruments that play that instrument sound when you pull them out to the tune of Old MacDonald's first few notes. Sometimes when I walked in or out of the room that one toy would play music, I got super weirded out and thought maybe there was a loose magnetic connection that was vibrating when the door shut, so I slammed the door to test it. Nothing, no music played. So I took all the pieces out of the board and put them next to it, figured problem solved. Went to walk out of the room and all the toys in the whole room started playing at once. Noped the duck out of the building, and got in trouble officially the next day for not properly cleaning the building. Unofficially I was told I wasn't the only person to experience things of that nature in the building, and my supervisor didn't blame me for doing what I did. Redditor 37. My neighbor died in this apartment complex, same floor as me, and was dead for 2 weeks before being found by smell, and after talking about him in conversation some poltergeist activity kicked up. A heavy glass mirror in the bathroom opened forcibly. I knew the sound and my hair trimmers came out of the mirror, turned 90 degrees and flew about 12 or 14 feet down the hallway, breaking them. Also voices were manifesting, even mimicking my then baby's cry from a bedroom in the house. Never questioned the paranormal again. Redditor 38. So I used to be a housekeeper at the hospital third shift, which I loved. We had a lot of slow nights, which was fine because manager didn't care, he just said don't get caught. Being in housekeeping I knew the hospital like the back of my hand. I was a full-time college student too, so I would know all the places to sleep. We had a few units that had closed down because they built a new tower in our hospital. The old units were completely empty, so I would hide and a few others would too. One night while I had nothing to do I decided to go into one of those empty rooms and take a nap. I sat in the chair in the room and put my head on bedside table to get comfortable, like putting my head on a desk in class. I kept hearing my name being called. I tried to move and I couldn't move. I peek on of my eyes open while trying to move, and I kept seeing the shoes of my manager and hearing him laugh. What felt like forever trying to get my body to move, and I finally popped up scared because I couldn't move. I called my manager to ask him why did he come in and laugh at me. He told me he didn't, he was on the other side of the hospital cleaning the floors. I hung up and went to where he was because I was spooked. He wasn't lying, he didn't even know where I was for the past 2 hours. I still work at the same hospital doing something different, but I still won't even go near that unit. Redditor 39, I've been attacked by some kind of demon vampire thing. I was wide awake, felt, and remember everything. No, it wasn't sleep paralysis, I wasn't asleep. Redditor 40, there was an abandoned house across the street. No utilities, no decks to get to the entry doors. It gave a bad energy. Ever so often the porch light would come on. Why?